The path of innovation often comes with challenges, especially when navigating a regulated environment. With a background in robotics and AI, our next guest brings his wealth of experience to the forefront as he discusses pretending to be agile, implementation of MES in a regulated environment. Prepare to gain valuable insights into effectively integrating MES in regulated settings. To shed light on this crucial topic, your applause for Michael Kaiser, leading smart manufacturing at Braun. Michael?
So,
Hi,
which
Michael.
button do I have to press? This one?
No, it's on.
It's on?
Thank you.
It's on. Thank you.
The stage
Okay.
is yours, Michael. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, first of all, welcome everyone, and again, my thanks to the colleagues from Critical Manufacturing. We have been here in Porto for, let's say, 10 times this year already. All of the time we were discussing requirements on MES and challenges, etc., etc. And now today I have the chance to give you some idea of, let's say, what is the current state of the way we are working together. So, just briefly to introduce myself and also Braun as a company. So we are not a semiconductor company. We are using, of course, chips in all cases. We are using them in our products, but essentially we are a medical device and a pharmaceutical company. So this, as the first step, is, let's say, important to understand. So we are working in a regulated environment. Whenever we are introducing a system that has some impact on the quality of our product, on the quality of the documentation, on the quality of our processes, not only has it to be validated, but we will have a regulatory audit. So we will have people coming from the local regulations, whether that's in China, whether that's in the US, whether that's in Germany, and they will actually verify that what we were doing yields the desired result, meaning data integrity in the documentation, proper specification of the products. But before I go ahead, I would like to ask you a question, because we'll talk about Agile, and I would like to ask you from a current perspective, what do you think are the biggest challenges that you have in, let's say, Agile project execution, or let's say Agile and hybrid, because typically you don't have something that is fully hybrid. For those who can't read the QR code, it's the menti.com, and then you can take just the use code 12999367. And I will ask the same question at the end of the presentation as well. And we will see how that develops. Okay, so quickly on Braun. So first of all, we are not semiconductor. Secondly, we are old. I mean, not everybody in the company is old. Maybe I'm old, but not everybody in the company is old. But the company itself is more than 180 years old. So that means we have a history how we are working. We have a lot of products that have evolved over time due to the demands of our customers, of the healthcare professionals, of the patients especially. But it also means that we have been manufacturing devices, we have been manufacturing medical devices for more than 150 years. And that does not mean that our factories today include machinery that are 150 years old, but they include machinery that are 50 years old. And when we talk about digitalization and MES introduction, that of course is a topic that we need to take care of. So overall, we are 65,000 colleagues. We are on all continents. We have 80 production sites, and we are investing both into development of our products, but we are also investing into development of our, let's say, manufacturing capabilities and into manufacturing digitalization. So one of the products that you may have seen quite often during COVID are our infusion pumps. They are what we call an active medical device. So we were talking this morning about collecting data, let's say, from our devices. We were talking about predictive maintenance. All of this is something that we are doing for our AMDs, so for the active medical devices. So what I'm talking about today is not what we do in general in digitalization, because we have a digitalization strategy. We have something that's called an AI hub. We have every year, we are working together with startups to find out certain technology that we want to further analyze, where we want to do MVPs, where we also prepare ourselves for making them applicable in our, let's say, operational processes. That's not the topic of today. Yeah? What we are talking about today is we have 80 production sites. They are distributed all over the world. They come from different sources, from different backgrounds, because we're not only growing out of our own, we're also purchasing companies. And we want to bring them to a certain level. And the smart manufacturing program that we were talking about earlier is not only about MES, it's about making sure that the entire stack of technology, and it starts with infrastructure, it starts with network, it starts with cybersecurity, etc., that this is applicable and available in all of our sites. So when we look at the way we are growing, then of course one thing is we are building new facilities, we are modernizing the facilities, and a key element, not the only one, but the key element in the digitalization of our production is of course MES. And now MES, okay, is, I don't want to say it's the same as Agile in terms of everybody has its own interpretation, but at least it's not very clearly defined. If I ask my production colleagues whether what they think an MES is, if I ask 3 colleagues, I get 4 answers. So that's something that we clearly need to fix. So, but before we go into the MES topic, let's briefly have a look at Agile, because I think Christian said it, Agile also has the tendency to be a little bit of a buzzword. So take this from Dilbert. Yeah? This is a little bit showing the topic that we have with Agile. When we talk about executing a project in an Agile way, it's sometimes the impression exists that it means, okay, we don't need to do specification. We just do everything as we go along. We don't have, let's say, we don't need to know stuff before. It's a little bit like what we heard just before. We just throw everything at the project, and just because we have the Agile methodology and we're doing these nice sprints and everybody talks about everything, at the end of the day, suddenly, miraculously, we have a system that is working. Of course, that's not working like that. But still, we are in a state and we are in a situation where we cannot just follow a classical waterfall model anymore, and there are reasons for that. So when we just look at, for the purpose of this talk, when we talk about or think about what is our common understanding of agility and Agile, on the left-hand side you see probably what you know, the Manifesto for Agile Software Development. What I want to make sure is that for this talk, what we mean by Agile, we talk about a working practice, a way of working that really encourages and understands that there are changes while we are working on something, that requirements can change, that we can start work on something even if we don't know 100% what we really need. We learn as we go along, and that's fine. There's no problem with that. But it also means, and that is also part of the original manifesto, that it's focused on customer needs. And the key message that I want to bring across here is customer needs is not only functionality. Customer needs is also budget. Customer needs is also time. So I can have a lot of discussions about, let's say, yes, we are figuring out how to do things, etc., etc. If by doing these discussions, by following a certain methods, I'm 6 months late with the delivery of the functionality that I need to ramp up my factory, I have a problem. So that's clearly the topic that we are talking about today. And one of the key elements that I also see here is the accountability, and it includes commitment. So when we talk about working together as a team in an Agile framework, it does not mean that we just do the best that we could, but we are really commit to reaching targets, even if it's in a different way than if we have everything written in a contract. So let us briefly look at what our MES history is, because I think that also is relevant to understand why we are where we are at this point in time. So first of all, a little bit of background concerning validation. I said that before, we are in a regulated environment, and regulation sounds a little bit like, come on, there are, let's say, the authorities, and they really want to, let's say, they want to see what we are doing, and isn't this, let's say, bothersome for us. No, it's not. Because once you are in a hospital, you want to be very sure that these pumps provide the medication at exactly the rate that is intended and not in some other way. That the pharmaceuticals that you get are as they were designed and not that, for example, the concentration of a certain active ingredient is suddenly higher than you wanted. You want to be sure that there is no contamination anywhere. And all of this is part of the qualification, how we call it, of the production equipment and the validation of the systems and the validation of the entire manufacturing process. So when we talk about systems that control the process, we need to be sure they do this right. If an MES hands over a recipe to a machine and the machine uses that recipe to verify that the parameters, the physical properties of a product are in a certain range, we have to be sure that this is correct. And we cannot just say, yes, we tested it, we have to prove. We have to provide what is called objective evidence. So this is just, let's say, for you as a background, independent on where we are in the world. Let's say, there's always a regulatory body that takes care of analyzing and reviewing, and at the end of the day, allowing us to produce, or let's say, to bring the products that we produce to the market. And if we have digital systems that are part of the production system, and if you have these digital systems can have a potential impact on the quality of the product or on the quality of the documentation that we provide for this product, they have to be validated. And that's a challenge. Because this validation also means that we need to be able to prove from, let's say, from the cradle to the grave, essentially, how do we really process the information that comes from, for example, from the equipment, which decisions do we make based on them, etc. So just as a side remark, we have, of course, areas where we say it might make sense to look at adaptive systems. But the topic of how to validate, for example, a neural network, which we train with deep learning in order to make a decision, how to validate that is simply not solved right now. It's not solved. So for us, in this environment, it's not a topic. So, history. This is a picture from our live factory that was opened in 2005. In 2002, we started that project, and let's say, why did we implement an MES here? Very simple answer. We are a family-owned business. And our CEO at that point in time wanted to have a fully digital factory. That's the answer. There was no question about ROI. That has been the basis, let's say, for our journey to build up the knowledge on how we are doing manufacturing digitalization. Independent on, let's say, the architecture, the technology, which of course is from a point of view 18 or let's say 20 years or almost 25 years later from the design perspective, this was a fully vertically integrated factory, fully paperless, complete electronic batch record, complete integration of equipment. A lot of that, let's say, custom made for that purpose. But let's say from a functional perspective, we were there. So the way we did this was very much in a traditional way, meaning, I remember working for months on user requirement specification, working for months on process descriptions, having endless discussions with potential MES and process control system, SCADA system, equipment system suppliers to make sure they understand what we want. And then at the end of the day, more or less, not exactly like that, more or less, throwing these 1,000 pages of specification over the fence, sign a contract and say, now you do it. It was working, It had certain disadvantages, but clearly this was the approach that we took at that time. And at the end of the day, we were successful. We were successful in having a fully running factory, a fully vertically integrated factory, completely, let's say, paperless, all fine. So from our perspective, having this huge amount of paper, essentially, of course, templates like this is where the equipment suppliers need to enter all their information, blah, 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 but this amount of paper was okay at that point in time. But what it meant is that first of all, the quality of the documentation, of course, the quality of the specification had to be very good. Because when we are going into such an approach, it means that, okay, every change will mean the supplier will just tell us, I need 5,000 euros more. Okay. Another thing was that the supplier has to be able to understand this, because we expect the supplier to read this, to come up with an estimation of time, of cost, and then commit to this in a contract, because we are going to work on this according to the contract. There will be penalties if the contract is not met. Yeah? Very classical EPC, so plant engineering business. And of course, there was no focus on out of the box. Because we write a specification, we say, this is what we want. And you go ahead and tell us how to do this. You use your platform, fine. We make some pre-decision of the platform. Okay, go ahead. But if you then need to add whatever, 5,000 man-hours and customizing, I don't care. Because we have a contract that makes sure you support it. Old, let's say, world. Now, new world is, first of all, this was kind of a lighthouse project. So as soon as we started to say that, okay, but now really what we want to do, we want to roll this out to other sites, we have to take a different approach. And the first thing was, and that's, I think, is also relevant to understand our perspective here. The first thing was to say we need to be clear about the functional scope of what we mean by MES. And in contrast to some things I heard today, for us, the MES really has a core functionality, and the core functionality is control and document the manufacturing process. MES functionality at the core is not OEE, is not analytics, is not plant maintenance. All of that is not MES for us. And the very simple reason for this is that the core that we're talking about in terms of functionality, we have to validate it. And if we have a situation where, because of operational requirements, and these exist, so we have to be able to very quickly, let's say, add or ingest additional data, make additional reports, add something, let's say, to the system to allow, for example, a shift leader to make a proper decision. I can't do that in a validated environment. Every time I change the system, I add something to the system, I have to make what we call a formal change. So I have to make a risk assessment. How is the effect on the already implemented functionality? So we clearly said, okay, we are focusing from an MES functionality perspective clearly on what we need to execute the production process and to prove that the product is okay. Clearly, that is kind of the defense that we do around MES. It does not mean that we may not have two MES instances in the plant where we use the second instance just for collecting data, reporting, etc. That's perfectly fine. But what we are talking about here now is to say that, okay, focus clearly on controlling and documenting the manufacturing process. Second point was, and that was also a topic that in our environment took us some time and was one of the, let's say, key success factors, was to be clear about how do we split the functionality between our ERP, which is SAP everywhere, and MES. So what do we do in ERP? What do we expect from the ERP as information? What do we model in the MES to make sure this is consistent across all the plants where we are producing medical devices? At least, because we're talking medical devices right now. And secondly, have a strategy how we are going forward to integrate the production machinery. Because all the production machinery, many of the machines that we have right now, we don't have the nice situation that we have in semiconductor where we have the semi-standards for equipment integration. They don't exist in our area. We have some specifications, for example, for injection molding, where based on OPC-UA, the so-called Euromap specifications have been created, but suppliers don't adhere to them yet. We are in a transition state. So what we need to do here is to say that whenever we buy an equipment, we need to work with the equipment supplier to make sure that the equipment supplier understands how the integration should work. And in many cases, we heard this morning, let's say, we looked into the future. I can tell you, if I talk to our equipment suppliers, I'm looking into the past. I'm looking at systems which are offered right now, where the operating system is not supported anymore, where the technology for integration is outdated, where people haven't even heard about something like OPC UA, and this is what we need to integrate. So really, let's say when we talk about this on a very different level. So, but how do we do this now? So, first of all, we are following now what we call a template approach. Template is not only template for the software. Template is also template for the process. So making clear that, okay, whatever you're doing, whether you're producing a side wrench, whether you're producing a catheter or something else, we always follow the same steps in principle. Could be that the data are a little bit different back and forth, could be that the equipment is a little bit different. Sometimes we have, let's say, injection molding and assembly, let's say, separated. Sometimes assembly and packaging is combined, whatever. Yeah, but in principle, we're always following the same things. Then we create an automation strategy for the specific site. Why is that important? Because in a high-wage location, for the same product, the same machinery, it's not necessarily a good idea to say, I employ or deploy the same systems and the same level with the same integration level than in a low-wage integration. Also, it's not only about wage, it's all about knowledge. Then we put this together based on this, say, okay, now this is the architecture that we are going to move forward to, and it's not only MES, it's the entire environment. And then we are on the MES level. And on the MES level, again, we are also following a template approach. Template approach for the MES means we have, let's say, in terms of a program management, we have several projects. One project provides the MES template. And that means, in our specific case, we have the critical manufacturing platform. We decide what are common functionalities, and the simple example is everything related to SAP integration. What are common functionalities that we need in all our plants? We bring this into the template. The template itself becomes a kind of product, a Braun product, so to speak, developed together with critical. And then for the different sites, we go ahead according to the process I showed before and say, okay, what do we need? We need for one site, maybe we are not going to need some elements in terms of inspections. In other sites, we may want to need that. In some sites, we may have an integration of certain optical inspection systems and some labeling specific functionality. Okay, so in each of these projects, what we're doing is we have a look at, are there any specific developments that are needed? Are there any modules, any functions that are needed where we have specific requirements coming out of the process? If yes, review them. Task of the template team, task of this template steering, and decide, okay, is this now a module that will be integrated into the next revision of the template or not? And so this is the overall approach that we're taking. So what this has now to do with Agile? Now, our needs have not really changed, but some of the constraints have changed, and a very, very specific requirement has changed. So first of all, in 2005, 6, 7, so all the kind of old MES projects, we always started under the assumption we don't know the MES supplier. We started with, okay, let's see who makes a good offer. Yeah. In the meantime, we have made strategic decisions for the different business areas which platforms we are going to use. It's not only one, yeah, but for the discrete manufacturing of, especially of the non-active medical devices and some of the active medical devices, we choose critical manufacturing. So fine, done, okay. We decided we go ahead with an MES template. Okay, so we need to set this up, fine. But now the next thing is, we have clearly identified also as a strategic target that we need to have the necessary technical know-how. And we are going to focus 100% on out of the box, meaning that also in case of process changes, let's say if process changes don't affect our ability to deliver, don't affect our, let's say, performance, process changes are acceptable, if that means we can stay in the out of the box scope. So, but now, in theory, no problem. In practice, unfortunately, we have investment projects running. And this is the one of the investment projects that is currently driving, let's say, our developments. And that's a huge extension of the medical device production that we have on our, let's say, corporate headquarters in Melsungen. And you see that on top, start of production is in May 2024. And the actual MES project started early this year. And now we say, okay, we're learning, we want to be agile, we want to do all these nice, let's say, approaches and these nice processes concerning refinement and analysis and blah, blah, blah. And what happens now? So bear with me, there's maybe a little bit too much text here. The important thing that I want to point out here is to say that we are moving, at least theoretically, to a shared responsibility. That's understood. That's also understood by us, by Braun. But what we have seen, and that is a topic that we have not solved yet, is to say that, okay, if because of the working mode, we see that there are delays, that we need more effort, right now, controlling our budget and knowing exactly how much money I need to spend until I'm there where I want to be in terms of functionality is next to impossible because of the approach that we're learning as we go along. And that really, really is a challenge because we are working in the context of an investment project. The investment project has a clear timeline. The investment project has a clear budget. And now we come along and say, yeah, but by the way, the MES is agile, we can't tell you. Not good. So, nevertheless, how we're doing this, and that is, let's say, from a technical perspective, that is working well, no problem. We have a common engineering platform together with Critical. We are working with other DevOps and an extension called Modern Requirements, based on which we can generate the necessary documentation. We use part of the information that's in the system. Some of the documentation still has to be paper-based because of our, let's say, of quality requirements, but we're getting there step by step, so that's fine. We have defined also here, you can see that, let's say, the details later, but the principle here is we have, with multiple iterations, established a working mode between the MES Braun team, the MES Braun template team, the critical manufacturing team, how we're going forward to say that, okay, this is now what we're really implementing, how we get packages delivered, how we test packages, how we, let's say, identify and report any issues. All of that practically is working fine. Unfortunately, it's too slow. So, when we look at what are typically the tasks that I have when I need to manage such a project, we always have the topic of scope, budget, time, and then, of course, technology, process, people. We heard this all this morning. I have to say that right now, in this working mode, managing time and budget is extremely challenging. It's extremely challenging because we are really navigating on site right now. There is no, let's say, of course, from a functional perspective, what we want to have, it's pretty clear. How we implement it, step by step. Every sprint gives us some more information. So, when we look at what are our biggest challenges, the pointy hat, of course, says, yeah, we don't need to plan. We just fix big mistakes as we go along. That may work if we are alone, but we're not alone in the world. We are part of an, let's say, in all our cases, we are part of an investment project. So, before I come to the conclusion, maybe there is, let's say, something that changed also in your perception. So I would like you to say that, okay, let's try this kind of survey again. I count back to 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Now, if I look at how well are we set up right now and what are we going to do? So we can say that the working in this agile, team-oriented manner is very good to handle disturbances. We're building up the necessary know-how. We are struggling with the quality. And that has some, let's say, some aspect of that is quality is also a little bit related to how well do fit things together. And if we are always looking at chunks of the problem to make sure that the solutions are consistent is really a topic. And to meet milestones and to stay in budget is really our biggest challenge right now. We're working on that. So the good thing is the team is working well, and that's fine. But really, just, let's say, with the expectation to say we are now introducing an agile working mode, and just because of that, we will manage the projects in a much better way and will be, let's say, much more happy with progress and result, not going to happen. So, final verdict. The question was at the beginning, do we pretend to be agile or are we really working in an agile way? I know I'm over time. And when we look at the different criteria that we have, that we say that, okay, we want to be adaptable, we want to work continuously, we want to promote and really encourage accountability. Where are we with that? And at least my final verdict is like this. We have several parts where we say, yes, the approach is working better than what we did before, clearly. And we're not going to go away from that. But we absolutely need to work on, let's say, bringing an agile, let's say, working mode, or rather an agile project execution mode, to make that compatible to the very traditional working mode that we have in all our investment projects. Because we're not doing software for software purposes. We're doing software for the purpose of running a factory. And the factory, of course, needs to produce products because the products at the end of the day are sold, and that's the money that we need to do software. Yeah? So this is where we are. For me, I can say, okay, also because of the willingness of the entire team to adapt and to make adjustments when needed, we call this agile. Whether you call this agile, whether you say we are on the right track or not, that's for you to decide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.